All right, hello everybody and welcome to Control+M Presents. Lots of new faces here. We're so glad you joined us. Just a reminder, this session is being recorded and it'll be posted on our YouTube channel. So I'm going to be muting everybody as they join. Don't forget to unmute when it comes time to asking questions. Thanks for being patient with us while we took a few weeks off to celebrate winning this year's Plex Partner Impact Award. Congratulations to everybody on this super hardworking team. I couldn't be prouder not only of the people on our team, but of our clients as well. Thank you so much for your support. Today, our Shannon Hadley is going to walk you through some very simple ways of pulling data from Plex so you can use it to create custom reports. Now, I want to make sure that I level set expectations. This session is for beginners like me who barely know how to get into SQL. Not for people who are writing reports every day. Now, if you're interested, we can have additional settings, just additional sessions on this. Just email Jill. That's the one you emailed to get this invitation today. Shannon joined our team earlier this year. She's working in our Canadian office. She has about 5 years working with Plex with all the modules, and she's done quite a bit of custom report development. We're really happy she's joined our team, and once you see how well she does explaining things, you'll understand why. So without any further ado, I'll mute myself and take it away, Shannon.
Thanks, Patty. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time today to join us for our Control+M Presents session. Today, we're going to be walking through how to create queries. To be able to export large amounts of data. Large amounts of data that can't be accommodated in a Vision Plex screen. If you need more data than what's available in an ad hoc report, or if you're looking for specific sets of data. Now, some of you may already be a little familiar with the SQL or SQL environment, and some of you may not. But today, we're going to be starting at the very beginning for those of you who are not familiar. Today, we're going to review the SQL environment. We'll look at a basic structure of a query. We'll break down our query to get a specific piece of data out of Plex, and we're going to export into a CSV file. Today's presentation will be useful for both Classic and UX, and I will point out small differences as we go. So let's go over some of the basic terminology that we're going to be using today. SQL or SQL. It's the computer language that manages the data in Plex. And today we'll be writing a simple SQL query to find specific information about a part and pull that information out of Plex from our part record. Now, Plex divides all of your information into easy to find sections that are called databases and tables. Inside of the parts database, you'll find smaller sections breaking down the part information into smaller, more manageable sections or tables. Now, think of your part record in Plex. It has a lot of information on your part number, name, source type, and so on. And you'll find the part data from your part record stored in the parts database in the part table inside of Plex. Now, you'll also find other tables in the parts database that relating to your part. Think of other places where your part or item appears: containers, jobs, shippers. All of these are tables inside of the parts database relating to the part. Now, queries are written with a standard set of commands that are always used when writing a query, like the 5 W's when you're writing a story. SQL queries are written with the same basic commands to get the information out of Plex. And we have to say what we want to see, where do we want the information to come from, and do we want to see everything or just specific pieces of data? Now, if we spoke a query out loud, it would sound something like this. Select all of the part numbers and part names from the part table on this specific link where all the parts start with a D. And we can have multiple filters or where clauses. And we can also say that parts start with a D and are purchased or only raw material. Now, without having all the basic commands in your query will not run. So let's start with looking at the navigation to and inside the SQL environment. you can navigate through the menu nodes at the top left of your screen through the main menu, platform, reporting, analytics, Vision Plex, and on to SQL. Or you could use the go-to search box and type in SQL. If you do not see the SQL Development Environment screen, you'll have to contact your administrator and to adjust security to provide you access. Now, once you've launched the SQL environment, in the middle of your screen in the white space section, starting with a 1, is where we will be writing our query. Now, these lines auto-populate with a sequential number as you add lines to your query. They're not editable, and just add a new number for each line you add. Now, this can be helpful when identifying errors, and it can tell you specifically which line it has found an error on. You'll also see all of the available databases to choose from: accounting, part, sales, communications. And there's 2 action bars: the standard blue action bar that you're all familiar with through Plex UX, and a query action bar below that. In classic Plex, they look very similar. And of course, you don't have the blue action bar in the classic screen. Let's look a little more closely at the databases we've been talking about. Beside the word database, you'll see a small triangle. And this is used to drill down into the available databases. And then again inside the tables. And inside the tables are the columns that we can add to our query. Now, for today's query, we're going to use the part database and the part table. In Classic, the databases are located and organized the same as UX. Here, we've drilled down into the available databases, drilled down into the part database, and into the part table to have the list of available columns in that part table. So here you can see all of the columns that are available from your part record that can be added to your query. It's like looking at the part record fields in a single list. In the middle of the screenshot of the available tables, you're going to notice a duplicate table name that has an _E at the end of one of them. Now, this is for enterprise, and we would use those _E tables when we need to pull data from multiple PCNs on the same query. But today, we're just going to concentrate only on extracting data from a single PCN. So here's an example of a basic query. I've added our select, from, and where statements. In this example, I used an asterisk for wildcard in the select statement. What I'm telling Plex here is I want to select all of the available columns in the part table for only the part number flour unbleached. The database and the table is separated by an _V_. You'll notice in the from statement, I used an as_P. Now, this is used as an identifier when there could be ambiguous column names in your query. So there could be a part name and a building name. And we'll have to identify each one according to when we added the table for the query to return name from the correct table. We could identify part name as P.name and the building as B.name. And I'll go through that a little bit more through the demo. Just a small note here, extra spacing is not required in your query. I've just included the extra spaces between the commands just for visibility today. When I'm ready to see results of my query, I'll click on Execute in the blue action bar, and the query results will display right on my screen. Now, what we're looking at here is all of the available columns and data from the flour unbleached part record in a single query. In Classics, the results will open in a new window. Now, we're not seeing all of the columns in this screenshot. There's actually 82 columns, and we'll narrow this down to a specific columns in a moment without the asterisks. Creating queries with an asterisk and no where clause will allow you to export large amounts of data with very little effort. And you can download the entire list of part records with their data and then manipulate further in Excel instead of writing or using your query to isolate out specific parts or details. Now, a few things to note here looking at the screen. If we look at the screenshot, you'll notice part key beside part number. And this is a unique numeric identifier of the part record, flour unbleached. And that's how we would join a part table to another table. Part type is identified as raw material in plain English, but the part source only shows a key, not the actual English version of what the part source is. And that means that in order to see the English version of a part source, we must join in that table to this one. But first, we're going to isolate out only some specific information we want to see for flour unbleached. I'm going to narrow down our query here to not see all 82 columns, just a few specific columns. So I removed the asterisks and I updated my select statement to return only part number, part name, and part source key in this next query. I don't have to change any other information in the from command or the where clause. And now when I execute my query, it's much more manageable to look at. The column titles are displayed exactly how it's written in the query. So let's say I wanted to alias or call the column something else other than part number. I want it to show up as item in my query. At the end of the part number column, under my select statement, I would add an as followed by the word item. Now in my query results screen, instead of the column being part underscore number, it's now being displayed as item. Let's go ahead and save this query. And we can run the query later or open it back up to add more tables and columns to it as we need to. Below the blue action bar, you'll see a Properties tab. And if we click on that, we'll see the option to give it a name we want. Otherwise, Plex is just going to generate its own non-descriptive name. Once we have the name of our query entered, we can click back to the Query tab or click Save in the action bar and then Save Stored Procedure. Just a quick note, the Save and Save As new stored procedure, it works like Excel or Word, save and save as. If you click Save Stored Procedure, it's going to save your query as is on your screen. The Save As New Stored Procedure would create and save a copy of your current query. If you'd opened an existing query and were making changes and wanted to simply save it as a completely new query, you could click the Save As and your original query would remain untouched and a new query created. To reopen an existing query, we can click the View Stored Procedures tab, and this will open a new window, and we can do a wide open search, a search by a query name, or search by an author to find an existing query and open it to make changes. Once we find our available query in the search results, we can simply click on it and it will open in the SQL environment. In Classic, all available stored procedures are available under the author's name from the SQL main page. And you can drill into available queries beside the author's name using that triangle drill down option we saw earlier. Now let's look back to our original query screen. We can see the part number, name, and part source key for flour unbleached. And we only see a key for the part source, not the English version of it. And we're going to go ahead and join the part source table to our original query. And we're going to do that through a join of another table found in the parts database. If we navigate to databases, specifically to the part database, we can see another table for part source. And after drilling into the part source table, we can see that it also has a part source key. Now to test, we can also run a query in another tab using the select asterisk to see what's in that table. And to make sure that it's indeed the table that we're wanting to join in. If you don't know where you can find what you're looking for, there is a tool that can be used to help you find databases and tables, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. Now, once we've found the table that we're going to join, which is the part source table, and we know how we're going to join it through the part source key, and we know this because we can see in each of the two tables as a common link between the two, it's the same key. And now we can go ahead and update our query. we're going to use the join clause followed by the database and table separated by the _v_, and giving it an alias of S to be able to identify the columns from the new table. And we use the on to say how we're going to join this table to our existing part table, which is by linking the two part source keys together, one with a P and one with an S. And there's several types of joins you can use: inner, left, right, and full outer join. Each one of those has its own purpose. For today, we're going to be using the inner join, which means that it's going to return results that have matching values in both tables. So if my part number does not have a part source or part source key, it will not display in my results. So our first three columns here are pulling from the P or the part record table. And our fourth column is pulling from the S or the part source table. When I execute the query, you can see we no longer have just a set of numbers identifying our part source. We have the actual part source as English in another column. And since I really don't need the key as a column in my query, I can comment it out of my query simply by putting 2 dashes in front of it, and it will remove it from my query results. Now, before we hop over into Plex to do a demo of writing the query, I'm going to show you how you can find those links between tables and databases if you're not sure where to look. Using the go-to search box, we go to a screen called Database Table Information. And once we've navigated into that screen, we can search specifically for, say, the part source key in our column name field. And Plex is going to return all the databases and tables where we would be able to find that column. And we can see the part source key we had in our query is available in the part database on the part source table, which is what we joined in our query in the other screen. And we can also see that there's a part source key in the sales database in the price adjustment table. In Classic, you'll find this screen under the Query Writer menu. Once we're satisfied with our query results, in the blue action bar, we can choose to download our query into a CSV file. If we click on the download results as CSV, the file will download exactly as we have it on our screen. In Classic, the download export option is found under the print action. Now, for those of you who may have not worked with CSV files before, you have to be aware that when opening and closing CSV files, all formatting is removed and you can run into some issues with dropped leading or trailing zeros in some of your fields. So you're going to have to pay attention to the data in your downloaded files. So let's go ahead and hop over into Plex, and we're going to create a query. We're going to export a large amount of data, and then we're going to create a more detailed query and download only specific information. So you can navigate to the SQL environment through the menu options at the top left of your screen, or you can go directly to the go-to search bar and typing in SQL. Once you've got the SQL environment loaded on your screen, you'll see the white space in the middle where we'll be writing our query. And you can see it's starting with a 1 for the auto numbering of the query lines. At the top, we have our blue standard action bar, and below that, we have the query action bar. On the left, we have our database menu options. Let's just hop quickly into Classic, and you can see the screens are very similar. We just don't have the blue action bar. You can find the databases under the Views tab. Okay, and then you have your execute button up here at the top. But for the remainder of the demo, we're going to be writing our queries in UX. So I know we need at least 2 parts to our query, a select and a from statement. So let's go ahead. So you'll notice when entering the word select, it's blue. Now this is to identify the statements, commands, and clauses from the rest of your written query. For the first query, I'm going to do a full export of all the part records with all 82 columns. And I'm going to do that with the asterisks. Hitting enter on my keyboard will drop the query lines down. Again, the extra spacing here, it's not required. Navigating to the database side of the screen, I'm going to drill down into the part database and then to the part table. Now we're going to add this to the from statement. Now we can do this one of two ways. I could manually type in the part database and the part table, or I could just simply double click and it will add it for me. Okay. So once I have the from added, I can go ahead and give it an alias. And I'm going to call this as P. Now, while there's no specific rules to aliasing it, it's always best once you start writing many queries to alias the same table the same way. Now, for part tables, I always alias it this way. So now when I execute my query, I'm going to get exactly what I asked for. All the part records in the part table and all of the 82 columns. Okay. So on screen, though, you're only going to see the first 500 rows. Now I can see if I scroll down here and use my slider bar, I can see all of the 82 columns. Now, for those of you who are more comfortable in Excel, we can simply just download this full export into the CSV and you can manipulate your data there. Now you can see my CSV file looks just like the results on my screen, but you'll notice there are a lot of zeros and nulls. Now this just means that if you look at your actual part record in Plex, those fields, there is no data there. Now I want to see in my query only specific columns, not all 82. And I think we have some technical difficulties. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the asterisks. I'm going to hit enter to have some space. And now we're going to select specific columns that I want to see. So just like I did when adding the from statement, I can simply double click the column name to add it to my query. Okay. So now I've added part number, name, and part source key columns. So in my select statement, all of the columns end with a comma, with the exception of the last one. So identifying that there is another column below that. I'm also going to alias each one of the columns based on the table that I added here. Okay, so what I'm expecting to see looking at this query, I'm looking to see all of the part records and only those specific columns. So when I execute my query, that's exactly what I'm getting, the 3 columns that I asked for. Now, let's go ahead and we're going to alias the column name. And let's say I don't want to have it showed up as part underscore number. So we're going to add item to the end of the part number column. And I'm going to do that by typing in as item. So now when I run my query, the column header is now showing as item and not the part underscore number. Now, because we're not seeing the English version of the part source key here, we're going to join on the part source table. Now we're going to do this by linking the part source key in our part table, which is the column here we saw, and we're going to link that to another table. So let's hop over into our database tab where we were looking for links between the tables and the columns we're looking for. if I type in my part source key here and hit search, this is where I can see the column name is in the part table in the part database. And there's also a part source key in a part source table in the same database. So if we go back here to our query and we can close our drill down, we can scroll down to where the part source table is. Drill down into that one, right? So now I'm going to add in my join. Okay, again, it goes in blue. So just like we did when we added the from statement up here, we can double click the database and table, and it's going to add it to the query for us. And I'm going to alias this one as S. And I do that just because it's part of the part source and it's easy to identify. So now I need to tell it how we're going to join it. And we're going to join it on, and we know through the part source key. So I can click the part source key and we can add this. Oops. And we're going to identify the tables here. And we're going to say this part source key is equal to this part source key. So now it's going to be linking that table to the table that already existed in our query. Okay. So now once I've got all that added, I'm going to go ahead and add in the actual part source column here. Again, I'm going to drop down another line. I'm going to double click my part source column and say that we're pulling that column from the new part source table. Now, because our part source key is no longer the last column in the select statement, I do have to add another comma here. Okay. So once I have everything added, I can go ahead and hit execute. So now we can see we have our item, our name, our part source key, and the actual English version of what that key means. Now you'll notice I no longer have any nulls here. Now that's because of the type of join I added. So on my query, I added an inner join, which is telling the query I only want to see information that's in both tables. So if I want to see the part, whether or not it has a part source, I can simply change my join type to a left outer join. Okay. So now when I hit execute, you can see that it's returning now back again all of the part cards, regardless if it has a part source key or not. So now everything's as I want it in my query. I no longer need to see the part source key here in my results screen. So because I have the English version of it here, so I can simply comment it out of my query by putting the 2 dashes. So now it's no longer visible in my query results. So I can, now that I have all the columns and all of the information that I want, I can go ahead and download this into a CSV file. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to save this query. I'm going to click on the Properties tab, and we're going to give it a name. Okay. Now, I can click on Save and Save Stored Procedure. And now my query is saved. And I can reopen it later to run it again, or I can open it later to add more columns to it or more joins. We're going to do one more thing here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to filter out. Let me just close this, go back to our query. We're going to go ahead and we're going to filter out for specific part source. And I would do this by adding in my where clause. And I want to know all of the parts that have a part source of purchased. So when I add my where clause, I'm going to put where clause equals And you'll notice that it turned green when I typed in the word purchase. It's kind of like breaking out the filters, like the commands that we had in our query where they turned blue. So when I execute this now, because I asked for something specific again, it's now no longer displaying my nulls, like when I did the join earlier. The nulls do not have any part source. So when I ask the query to return only part records that are purchased, it's not going to display them in my results. I can go back to my query and simply comment out the where clause and execute again. And then I can see the entire list back to the way it was. And there you have it. So now I can go ahead and export the data I want into a CSV, and I can manipulate it further from there. So that's all I have to cover for today. Now I've shown you how to write the simple query, add in a filter, and join a table. And we did want to keep things a little simple for today. And hopefully it gave you a little bit of an appetite for doing a little bit more and exploring around in your SQL environment. So let's go back out to the presentation and see if anyone has any questions for me.
Just want to remind everybody that you're muted. So if you have a question for Shannon, please make sure you unmute yourself before you bring it. I see somebody's unmuted, but I'm not hearing a question just yet. Too shy?
Hey, hey Shannon, this is Rick Lamp. Can you show in UX that design tab? There's a way you can show the links there as well. I've seen that briefly, but I still don't understand how to do it.
Oh, you want me to go back to the database section?
Yeah, well,
Yep.
no, in the actual SQL editor, there's that design tab. Have you used that? Or I'm sorry, the diagram tab. Click the diagram tab.
Oh, the diagram? Okay, yeah, I can go through that briefly, sure.
And can you, because there's a way you can pull the tables over and it shows the keys and the links and everything.
Yep, sure, I can go ahead and do that. So
Okay.
let's go ahead, like we saw in our query where we added the part table and we added a part source table. We added two tables. So we have this little option also called the diagram here. Not a lot of people use it. I have used it in the past when I'm struggling with finding a link between, sometimes you have to add tables in between other tables to get what you actually want. So under the diagram, you can add the part, and it's going to put it like this. And then we could go down to our part source again. And you can see now that it's drawn a line between the part and the part source. So we know that we can definitely link these two tables. When I double click this, it tells me how we can link it on from the part to the part source table. And we would do it exactly like we have it down here. It's just drawn out for us here. If we add something that can't be linked directly, let's say, spell something quickly here. Oh, well, that's not a good one. I'm trying to think of one that doesn't have part in it to show that it doesn't link. Personnel.
Maybe a work center list or something,
Yeah.
Shannon?
An action code. There we go. There's one. So you can see, thanks, Betty. So you can see here that, let's say I did want to join this table to the rest of my query. By just having it with the existing information that I have here, there is not going to be a link between. I have to find something that jumps between this table and this table to be able to join them all together. Does that help, Rick?
Yes, that helps a ton. So how the account table that you pulled over, do you know how to remove it from there?
You remove it once I've added it, you mean?
Yeah, so on that diagram tab, so you've got
Yeah.
it there, but you brought it over by accident. How can you remove it from the diagram?
Oh, boy.
Okay, You don't know either. Yeah, nobody seems to know. I haven't found an
Yeah.
answer for that
I
one.
know it has it in Classic, you can do it.
Yeah, well, we need to dive, you need to do UX.
Yeah,
so
but I
I'll-
can't, once it's added here, that's a good thing. Let me find that out, Rick. See if we can find any ways to get that removed.
If you double click it, there isn't a remove button.
Not here, no. It does have it in the Classic,
Right.
but it doesn't seem to have it here in the UX.
Shannon, it doesn't work if you just drag it back over, does it?
Listen. No. Oh. No, it just went off my screen.
Maybe if you break the link.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, Rick. Well, let me see if I can figure that out. And we'll see if we can come up with a solution for getting it out of there once it's on the diagram. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I got a quick question. Is there any easy way to revert? This is Mark with BioFit Engineered Products.
Hi, Mark.
Is there any way to reverse engineer these queries? Like if I'm looking at an invoice and there's like a ship to or bill to address within that invoice, is there any easy way to figure out how Plex has pulled all those things together? Is there like a procedure that you can look at to try to figure out where those are derived from? Those
Yeah, so this is where you could use the diagram here to find. So you would start with, say, your invoice, and then you could pull down in here the common, the customer, and the addresses, and try to find the links between them here. You could also try.
That's what I've been doing. That's not an easy process.
Yeah. I mean, once you've done it once, I mean, you won't forget either how the links go. I mean, you've got an invoice, if you're looking for something, you have to tie on the customer to be able to get the address, right? So you kind of got to follow the path in your head and try to figure out what are you looking at and what do I need to see? So you would just follow that logic, even if you have to write it down. I've written it down many times and just drawn where I'm starting from and where do I want to go and what would be the links in between. I can't just jump from invoice to address.
Yeah, what the field that I'm speaking to particularly is that we have our dealers, and under our dealers, they create contacts. So that would be the end user. So that was what I was really struggling with. I didn't know whether that was under the communication contacts or where that lived. I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Mark, on some screens, there's a blue question mark that has the table name. Now it's hit or miss where it's there, but in UX, again, look at the screen and see if there's that blue question mark, and there will give you the table name.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, we're still classic, so I wasn't doing any of this development in the UX environment, but I could try that.
That features in Classic too. There are some of the screens in Classic as well that they do have a table name. It's not a blue question mark, it's something else. There's I forget, you can actually pull up some of the ASP code behind it and do it, but we're moving to UX, so I've just biased everything to UX.
Right.
That's potentially something that we could explore on another session and more in-depth session on pulling on multiple tables and, finding those links between them.
So can you tie these queries to VisionPlex so that you can just select items on the VisionPlex screen? Or is that totally different?
Yeah, once you have your queries written here, you can convert it. Oh, how do I say that? Once you have your SQL query written and functional, and you can tie it into the VisionPlex, the designer. I think the UX has the designer, and you can select which tables that you want or which columns you want to see from your VisionPlex screen. And the same in Classic. Classic uses it a little bit different. You would have to look at that through. Is it data sources? No.
Well, while she's looking, the knowledge base has a really great VisionPlex tutorial. That's all I taught myself. It really gives you the basic stuff. They've also put out a VisionPlex user manual that's really good. And then item 3, so I'll put in a plug for Control+M. The little bit of training I've had is through them, and they've been very helpful as well. And we're looking at potentially doing some more there. But either of those 3 options are very helpful.
Thank you.
So you could do, once you have your query, you could go through in the create button here in your environment, in the data sources, and that would create a VisionPlex screen for you. And then you could go ahead and, you know, I think there's another Control+M Present session out there for the VisionPlex.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions for Shannon? I know we probably could grill her on a bunch of individual queries, and if you'd like to do that, go ahead, send her an email offline.
Hello, this is David. I have a quick question. Can we go to the existing reports and add to the existing reports something that we might need?
David,
So
I'm going to recommend that you listen to a session, and I'll send it to you, that we did called Simple VisionPlex Changes to Existing Reports. Because what it'll do is show you the fields that are in the query that can be added and how to add them.
Yeah.
Okay, please do.
I have a similar question. There's a format of a report that is a canned report that was developed already, but I have a different application and would like to use some of the similar format. Is there an ability to look at that SQL program and go in and modify it, or is that not available?
On an existing, like a standard Plex report that's inside?
Yes, a standard VisionPlex report.
Yeah, not there. There are some. There's a very few that have the code visible that you could copy and paste from, and there's others that you can. What you can do too is go in and edit the VisionPlex screens if there's one existing, and you can see how they're tying the information in. But not.
On the VisionPlex screen, you can find the data source for that screen, and then you can look up the query, and then you can just copy the code and adapt it that way.
Okay.
I just put the link out to that. And I apologize, I had to click off it right away because it started to play on IntelliPlex screen changes for non-coders. It's in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to go to our YouTube session. It's one of our earlier videos. So you have to kind of scroll down to the bottom, but there are simple changes that my team even lets me make, and I am not a developer. So any other questions for Shannon? Well, Shannon, if you don't mind, would you go back to your PowerPoint?
Okay.
Shannon, I just want to tell you, go ahead to the next screen if you would. Great job on a topic that I myself get a little bit stressed about. And I usually reach out to Shannon or Veronica on my team whenever it comes to reports, because I'm pretty good at breaking them, not very good at writing them. You really do make it look very easy, Shannon. And thanks, Rick, for bringing up that diagram. I never clicked on that before, and I really like it. So our next session is going to be held on June 30th by Ken Keller. He's going to be talking about different job production methods. And that might seem really basic, but when we find ourselves doing an optimization project with clients, oftentimes we end up going back to basics. And Ken's going to make sure that you understand A, what all these options mean and their best use cases, and B, what kind of damage can be caused if you're using the wrong type of method. So if you're interested in that, make sure you email Jill, our fabulous marketing person who does a great job keeping us all on track with Control+M Presents. Thanks everybody for spending your time with us today. We sure appreciate you joining us live. And if you're watching our recording, please take a minute to like our videos and follow us on YouTube. Remember, these are no cost, no obligation. We're just sharing what we know so we can make the Plex community stronger. All of our sessions are out on our YouTube. You can watch them anytime, and so can anybody else who uses Plex. So thanks again, and stay healthy, everyone.